Imagine waking up in complete darkness. The sun has not risen for 3 solid months. Outside, the temperature is 60 degrees below zero. You are trapped inside a wooden ship, and the ocean around you is frozen solid. You cannot move. You cannot escape. And worst of all, you are slowly going insane. In 1845, the British Empire launched the ultimate mission. 2 massive, high-tech ships, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror. They sent 129 of their best, most elite sailors into the freezing Arctic. Their goal? To find a legendary path through the ice called the Northwest Passage. They were prepared for anything. They had huge steam engines, heating systems, a massive library, and enough food packed in shiny new tin cans to last them for 3 full years. It was supposed to be a massive victory, but none of those 129 men ever returned home. They completely vanished off the face of the earth. For over 150 years, the disappearance of the Franklin expedition was one of the greatest mysteries in history. No one knew how 2 unbreakable ships could just disappear. Until search teams started digging in the ice. When they finally found the first graves, they were horrified. The bodies were buried in the permafrost, perfectly preserved like statues, mummified by the extreme cold. Their eyes were half open, staring blankly into the freezing void. But finding those frozen bodies was just the beginning. Because what they found next was truly brutal.
It is the morning of May 19, 1845. The sun is shining brightly in England. The docks are packed with thousands of cheering people. They have gathered to watch the absolute pride of the British Empire set sail. 2 magnificent, massive ships, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror. They are heading into the freezing unknown of the Arctic to find the Northwest Passage, a legendary shortcut through the top of the world. The man chosen to lead this epic journey is Sir John Franklin. He is an experienced explorer, and his crew of 129 men are the absolute best the Royal Navy has to offer. They are highly trained, highly disciplined, and completely confident. In fact, they believe they are invincible. And looking at their ships, you can understand why. These are not just wooden boats. They are floating fortresses. They are reinforced with heavy iron plates on the bow to smash right through solid ice. They are even fitted with massive steam engines taken from railway locomotives. This is the absolute peak of cutting-edge technology. To the people of 1845, these ships are like spaceships heading to another planet. Because they plan to be gone for 3 years, they need a massive amount of supplies. They load the ships with over 32,000 pounds of preserved meat, 1,000 pounds of raisins, and nearly 8,000 tins of soup and vegetables. But here is where the story takes a dark turn. This massive food order was given to a cheap contractor at the very last minute. The workers had to rush. To seal the thousands of tin cans, they used cheap lead solder. If you were to look closely at those shiny new cans, you would see thick, sloppy drops of toxic lead dripping inside, right into the food that these 129 men would depend on for their survival. Without even knowing it, they are carrying a ticking time bomb of poison in their own kitchen. But the British Empire is so completely blinded by their own arrogance that they do not care about the details. Instead of packing more survival gear, they pack the ships like luxury hotels. They bring solid silver cutlery with their initials carved into them. They bring mahogany writing desks, hand-cranked organs for music, and a library of thousands of books. They even bring a pet monkey to keep the men entertained. They are preparing for a grand, comfortable adventure. But they forget one very crucial, very deadly thing. The Arctic
does not care about your technology. It does not care about your silver plates, your books, or your pride. As the Erebus and Terror slowly sail away from the cheering crowds, they look like the ultimate symbol of human power. But in reality, they are sailing directly into a massive, frozen trap. And this beautiful departure is actually a funeral procession. For the first year, the expedition actually goes according to plan. They spend their first winter at a place called Beachy Island. But even there, the Arctic gives them a warning. 3 young sailors die of mysterious illnesses and are buried in the freezing permafrost. The men ignore the warning and push forward. But in September of 1846, near the desolate shores of King William Island, the trap finally and permanently snaps shut. The temperature drops so rapidly that the ocean around the Erebus and Terror does not just freeze flat. The currents push massive chunks of ice together, creating jagged ridges. It becomes a crushing vise of solid ice. The massive ships are locked in place. They cannot move forward. They cannot go back. They are completely paralyzed. And then the sun goes down. In the high Arctic, winter means total, absolute darkness. For months at a time, there is no sunrise, just pitch black night, howling winds, and temperatures plummeting to 60 degrees below zero. The cold is so extreme that the moisture from the men's breath instantly freezes, turning the inside walls of their living quarters into a layer of frost. Imagine the psychological torture. 129 men trapped inside 2 dark, freezing wooden boxes. Every single night, they have to listen to the terrifying, ear-piercing sound of millions of tons of ice grinding and screaming against the wooden hull of their ship. The men start suffering from extreme paranoia. In the pitch-black darkness, they begin hallucinating. They become aggressive. These highly disciplined, elite Royal Navy sailors are slowly losing their minds, turning into ghosts trapped in a wooden cage. And as if the lead wasn't enough, the fresh meat has completely run out. Scurvy sets in. It is one of the most horrifying diseases a sailor can face. It literally melts the collagen in your body. Their gums turn black and swell up so heavily that their teeth simply fall out into their hands. Old scars on their bodies, injuries that healed years ago, suddenly break open and start bleeding all over again. They are literally rotting alive in the dark. The smell of death fills the cramped spaces of the ships. Then, in June of 1847, the final devastating blow strikes. Sir John Franklin, their captain, their leader, their only symbol of hope, dies. His death leaves the starving, bleeding men completely leaderless in the middle of a frozen hell. By this time, 24 men are already dead. A shockingly high number for a military crew. The invincible steam engines are dead silent. The silver cutlery is a sick, useless joke. 3 long years have passed. No rescue ships are coming. The ice is never going to melt. Captain Francis Crozier takes command, and he realizes a terrifying truth. These magnificent ships are no longer vehicles of exploration. They are floating coffins. And if they stay on board for one more winter, every single one of them will die. It is April 22nd, 1848. The Erebus and Terror have been trapped in the crushing ice for exactly 1 year and 7 months. The new commander, Captain Francis Crozier, writes a final, desperate message and hides it under a pile of stones. It states that 24 men are dead, including Sir John Franklin. And then he gives the ultimate order: abandon the ships. The remaining 105 men step out onto the endless white ice. Their plan is practically a suicide mission. They intend to walk hundreds of miles south toward the Canadian mainland, hoping to find a river that leads to a trading post. To survive this journey, they need to travel light. They need to be fast. But remember, their brains have been heavily poisoned by toxic lead for 3 years. They are no longer thinking like rational human beings. Instead of packing just the essential survival gear, they decide to drag massive, heavy wooden lifeboats across the ice. And what do they pack inside these lifeboats? The archaeological evidence found years later is absolutely chilling. When modern searchers finally found these abandoned boats sitting in the snow, they did not find extra food or warm clothes. They found pure, arrogant madness. Freezing, starving men had packed silk handkerchiefs, scented soap, and heavy silver cutlery. They brought dozens of heavy books, button polish, and even a heavy mahogany writing desk. These men were walking into a frozen wasteland, dying of scurvy, and yet their lead-poisoned brains forced them to drag thousands of pounds of useless luxury items across the ice. They were desperately trying to hold on to the civilized British Empire, even as nature was actively tearing them apart. The physical toll of this death march is impossible to imagine. The ice of the Arctic is not flat like a skating rink. It is broken, jagged, and pushed up into massive walls.
Now, imagine dragging a wooden boat that weighs thousands of pounds over those jagged ice walls. Now imagine doing it while the temperature is 40 degrees below zero. Now imagine doing it while your gums are rotting from scurvy, your joints are bleeding, and you haven't had a full meal in months. It doesn't take long for the men to start breaking down. Their hearts simply give out. Men begin dropping dead directly in their tracks. The survivors are too weak to even bury their friends. They just leave the bodies where they fall, scattered in the snow, marking a horrific trail of death that stretches for miles. They are dragging their massive wooden boats to nowhere. The luxury items inside are becoming heavier with every single step. And as the food completely runs out, the starving survivors look at the frozen bodies of their fallen friends. And they realize exactly what they have to do next. Now, imagine dragging a wooden boat that weighs thousands of pounds over those jagged ice walls. Now imagine doing it while the temperature is 40 degrees below zero. Now imagine doing it while your gums are rotting from scurvy, your joints are bleeding, and you haven't had a full meal in months. It doesn't take long for the men to start breaking down. Their hearts simply give out. Men begin dropping dead directly in their tracks. The survivors are too weak to even bury their friends. They just leave the bodies where they fall, scattered in the snow, marking a horrific trail of death that stretches for miles. They are dragging their massive wooden boats to nowhere. The luxury items inside are becoming heavier with every single step. And as the food completely runs out, the starving survivors look at the frozen bodies of their fallen friends. And they realize exactly what they have to do next.
There is a terrifying reality to starvation. Before you die, your body slowly consumes itself. The pain in the stomach becomes a burning fire. And eventually, the brain shuts down its moral barriers. For over a century, the British Empire absolutely refused to believe the rumors. They stated that the highly civilized elite men of the Royal Navy would rather die with honor than cross the ultimate forbidden line. But the ice never lies. In the 1980s and 1990s, modern archaeologists traveled to the desolate shores of King William Island. They were looking for answers. What they found instead were scattered piles of human bones, bleached white by the Arctic sun. They carefully collected these bones and placed them under modern microscopes. And what they saw staring back at them was the absolute collapse of human civilization. The bones were covered in deep, aggressive scratches. These were not the bite marks of polar bears or wolves. These were precise, calculated cuts made by steel blades. The men of the Franklin expedition had systematically butchered their dead crewmates. But the brutal truth did not stop there. The scientists found something called pot polish on the edges of the bones. This happens when human bones are snapped in half and boiled in metal pots. The starving survivors were not just cutting meat. They were breaking open the bones of their friends to suck out the last drops of marrow.
Imagine the absolute horror of that scene. These were men who had packed solid silver cutlery, silk handkerchiefs, and the poetry of Shakespeare. And in the end, they were sitting in the freezing dark, boiling the bones of their shipmates just to survive one more agonizing day. None of it worked. Every single one of the 129 men died in that white hell. They walked until their hearts stopped, leaving a trail of bones and abandoned luxury items scattered across the frozen Canadian desert. For over a century and a half, the exact location of the massive ships remained a mystery. But finally, in 2014 and 2016, underwater drones located the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror. They are sitting at the bottom of the freezing ocean. They are perfectly preserved in the icy water. Silent ghost ships, forever guarding the darkest secret in the history of exploration. The Franklin expedition was meant to be the ultimate triumph of technology and empire. But the Arctic swallowed their pride, their ships, and their humanity. It stands as a chilling reminder that no matter how advanced we think we are, when you step into the absolute extreme of nature, nature will always win.